What is your opinion of climate change?
I don't think it's an inherently negative thing, but the current ways that our climate is changing is definitely negative. I think that climate change can be defined as any type of prolonged change to the way that the environment reacts to natural and unnatural influences. So I think that human influence has a lot to do with climate change, and I think that currently it's definitely the leading cause for climate change. I don't really think that we can chalk climate change up to something natural at this point. If you just look at like geologic time periods, obviously we went from the ice age to now, back, forth, whatever. Climate change is a natural process, but the accelerated rate at which it's occurring right now, it's not natural and it's definitely man-made. Why they're making climate action plans for 2050 when it's projected to have been irreversible by then, I don't know. Where is the 2025 plan?
Energy, you think we'd be sick? I'm running out of energy. See, we use it all.
What up, world? It's Legrand. It's another episode of Keep That Same Green Energy podcast. As we always do, we allow our guests to introduce themselves. Guests, please introduce yourself.
Hello, world. My name is Skylar Tate Ann Ross, aka Star. If you want to get artsy with it.
Star, what do you do?
What do I do?
Yes.
I'm currently a second-year undergraduate student at Princeton University.
Yes. Applause.
Applause.
That is great. So we always ask our guests to give us a little bit of a background on how they know Legrand or how they identify with climate action. So how do you know Legrand?
How do I know Legrand? I think Legrand might be my uncle. Not sure sometimes.
It's my secret identity.
Yeah. Undercover.
Yeah. I'm Clark Kent right now. Legrand is Superman. I just would put it that way. But in another podcast episode, she was referenced as a source to lead someone on the path to their climate action path. So we wanted to get her fresh perspective. So we do always ask guests to talk about a song that connects you with Legrand or with climate action. And you chose an interesting song. So just to give a little background. So Legrand being a hip hop artist, a lot of the music that people identify with Legrand is hip hop music. So when Star shared her song, it was like, I was thrown back a little bit. It was a song I had heard. It was a song that I had heard. Didn't know that artist was the one who sung it. But what was the song that you chose and why did you choose it? And what was the connection with climate action?
I picked Changes by David Bowie.
Nice.
And I selected this song because in the chorus and like later on towards the song, he starts talking about like basically the youth's opinion on different political movements indirectly. He doesn't say it explicitly, but he indirectly states that like the youth have a large sway on change and making changes in the world. So I thought that it was fitting for a talk about climate change as things are always changing and whatnot.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you articulated that connection because obviously my generation, I looked at it differently just from listening to the lyrics, but one of the things that got me active as a climate activist was the youth.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people all the time, I went to a climate strike and it was like the fifth graders bawling their eyes out. Like, like, we got one planet. And we don't have a planet B and they're crying. I'm like, it's real for them. Like it's a finite end to them existentially. So,
Like it's all very pressing for my generation because we were brought up from like kindergarten even with, prevalence on Earth Day and just being made very known and aware about the climate crisis as opposed to like the way that it was treated a couple years prior to my like generation's upbringing. So yeah, I think it does hit close to home for us a lot.
Yeah. And it's good to hear that perspective because I think, again, when I mention I'm speaking on behalf of that generation, but to hear people closer to that generation in that generation speak to it, I'm aligned. Like I feel like, okay, I'm aligned. I'm doing something that makes sense. So at this point, I typically take a perspective from the audience that's relevant to the guest before we get into why we're here, climate action. So just something that's relevant to today, and you being going through your first year at Princeton, what is your opinion or perspective of how college administrators and the campus, administrators are protecting students from active shooters and violence on campus? And I say that I say it's relevant to me because today is a graduation day. Last week, a lot of graduations happening in this month. And of the 3 graduations in the past 3 days that I know about across the nation, there were mass shootings at graduation ceremonies. Wow. At graduation ceremonies. And so, and I'm not going to highlight those. You can do the research if you question it. But three days of graduations, 3 separate mass shootings, and I'm just curious, as somebody that just spent a semester, 2 semesters on college campus, how did you feel about? Did you feel safe? Do you feel like administrators are doing enough about protecting students against violence?
I feel with my school particularly because it's so isolated to where it is. Like, Princeton's campus is just plopped in this little suburban town, and it's kind of like gated on all the perimeter, so it's really not very, it's open to the public, but it's not
overly accessible.
Yeah, exactly. It's not incorporated into a city in the way that NYU or even Columbia's campuses are. Temple, it's not really like open concept, I guess. So I don't think that Princeton in particular has lots of emphasis on like school shootings and stuff like that. Honestly, in the 2 semesters that I was there, like shooter drills, nothing like that was ever mentioned. So okay. Yeah, I guess that they've never had an issue with it in the past, but given the current political crisis of this state, this country, I don't think it's a completely unattainable thing to happen, but they definitely haven't mentioned anything about it. So yeah, draw conclusions from that.
But you feel, you didn't feel like unsafe?
No.
Okay, at any time?
Not really.
Okay.
Princeton is really safe. It's very calm. It's very suburban.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's a positive.
It is definitely a positive thing.
And I agree with you. I've visited that campus quite a bit. And while it is open, it's not like and not to put this college on blast, but like college in Charleston, like you could if you're a person walking through the city, like you just walk on campus.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
there's no need to walk through the Princeton campus to go anywhere else.
Right. There's nothing else. Either you're there to be a Princeton or you're not. Exactly. Yeah, you're not shopping.
It's intentional.
Yeah, that makes sense. So getting into the crux of the podcast, I define climate action as climate change is what's happening regardless of what we do. Climate action is how we respond to that and be intentional to try to counter that. What is your opinion of climate change? And I feel like I'm leading the witness when I say, is it real? Is it not? Because a lot of people are like, I think it's made up, it's a hoax. And I don't want to lead the witness, but your opinion, how do you define it? And then how do you look at climate action? How do you feel about it?
I define climate change, honestly, I don't think it's an inherently negative thing, but the current ways that our climate is changing is definitely negative. I think that climate change can be defined as any type of prolonged change to the way that the environment reacts to natural and unnatural influences. So I think that human influence has a lot to do with climate change. Exactly. And I think that currently it's definitely the leading cause for climate change. I don't really think that we can chalk climate change up to something natural at this point, though it is a natural occurrence. Exactly. I mean, if you just look at like geologic time periods, obviously went from the Ice Age to now, back, forth, whatever. So climate change is a natural process, but the accelerated rate at which it's occurring right now, it's not natural and it's definitely man-made.
Yeah. And so from a climate action perspective, do you feel like there is more immediate things that can be done? Because, most of what I'm seeing is our plans, 2040, 2050, we plan to be. Do is your opinion there are things that we can do now that can, I hate to use the term mitigate, but like, kind of make some drastic inroads in changing the course of it?
I think that it is possible, but I also think that we need to look at like phrases like there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, because we can try to, and I mean we as a general population, not as government officials, can attempt to implement strategies and change and whatever, but unless it's done on a very large scale and in a radical way, the attempts to mitigate the effects of climate change aren't really gonna unfortunately amount to much unless they are moved in a large collective unit. And given that the government is more concerned about I don't know, like abortion bans than things that are actually affecting us every day, it's kind of hopeless and like unfeasible that, thank you, Septa,
Yeah.
that
Literally.
literally a large scale movement would like occur just based off of people, because I also think that being able to fight climate change is a privilege, because people, like, one of the easiest things that you can do to fight climate change in your own, I guess, is using less water, using less electricity, or making a switch from being a meat eater to a vegetarian or a vegan. But whenever people like to bring that up, I always say that it's a privilege to be able to choose to not eat something.
Correct.
So I think that we have to like keep in mind the economic, the racial state, the political whatever of the general population, and to be ordered to make like an educated movement about climate change. But first needs to come from the government. And why they're making climate action plans for 2050 when it's projected to have meaning climate change, exactly, it's projected to have been irreversible by then.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Why would you set
where is the 2025 plan? I don't know. But yeah, I think it definitely needs to come from the legislation first, and I guess that can be done with voting. But America and their political scale is a little bit like this now.
So two things I want to follow up on. One is when it sounds like you're saying that we have to respect the fact that people, it could be a big decision to choose. Like, we think of it as, I'm just going to stop eating meat. But in some of our communities, they don't have a choice to say, I can't eat meat or I can't eat this, because that is all that I have access to in this community, right? So I think it's a good call out that you're, because again, I'm guilty, right? I'm like, it's just as easy as, obviously you can't just choose to go from combustion engine to EV without some thoughts or research. But I think you bring up a good point relative to part of that process is weighing the privilege of, this is really important to me, but I have to be willing to sacrifice something in order to do it.
Exactly.
If Chris wants to stand on business about being carbon neutral, yes, it would be a lot easier for me to fly and meet guests and be there. But if I'm going to stand on business, I have to consciously make a decision to drive 14 hours in an EV to mitigate. So I think it's a good call out. The other piece of it is, and this is just for my edification relative to soil drawdown as a my perception is that is an immediate way to try to impact the carbon footprint. How do you feel about soil drawdown as an option? And do you think that needs to come from, you're saying that needs to come from the option of pulling the carbon out of the air and through the soil to kind of filter it as an immediate way to kind of.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Who's implementing this is my concern.
Yeah.
And I think that, like you were saying, where you have to sacrifice something in order to make a change, I think that that's unfortunate, but also inevitable, because a lot of the climate issues that we're faced with right now, like the man-made ones, have to do with overconsumption. So it's about us making an active choice to underconsume, which is obviously not ideal for some people, especially the ones who are living in privilege. And I'm saying this as I'm sitting on the 5th floor of my house in Philadelphia, that people who are in positions such as these need to recognize that and move accordingly. But if you're living one way for your whole life, it can kind of be difficult.
It's a
now,
drastic change.
exactly, to grow back from it.
Absolutely. But like, and that's why I said there's communities where, you know, they say the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Like there's situations where communities like, I'd love to be able to give up food, or I'd love to be able to be sustainable, but I'm in poverty, or I'm in my circumstance doesn't allow me to make those sacrifices. Chris, I'd love to ride with you if I'm not in your position. Like I'm not in the position you're in. So I think that's a great call out. So at this point in the podcast, we typically ask guests to, and I think you gave some suggestions too, but what is one thing or one additional thing that you would commit to going forward that would help, either make you carbon neutral,
Carbonless,
or right, or just have a greater impact on the climate action?
I think that for me personally, when I first became involved with this, my high school had majors like a college does, and mine was environmental science and sustainability.
Yep.
So I felt that in order to make an actual dedication and effort to that, I had to change something about the way that I was living my life. So starting from that, I became pescatarian, and then I was pescatarian and didn't eat dairy or eggs, and then I was vegan for a while. And I was like vegetarian again, and now I'm back to pescatarian.
Okay.
So I feel like it was definitely a journey. I feel like once I'm in, probably out of college and not eating dining hall food, I will probably go back to being vegan once I have like full control over what I'm eating. But again, it is a privilege to be able to not eat food. So in my personal journey, I definitely try to reduce my meat consumption on a large scale. I also only thrift my clothes or get them from small businesses, support that community, and also don't feed into large
corporations.
Yeah, corporations.
Okay.
Whatever.
That's two good ones.
Yes, I think that in the future, probably just like reducing my consumption of other resources like water and electricity would probably be beneficial for me personally.
Okay.
But at this point, I do like my long showers and my TV.
Guilty.
Yeah, sorry guys. But that's definitely something that wouldn't be that difficult to do either, that in moving forward I could implement.
Yeah, and I think you bring up another interesting point about it's a journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not hearing this podcast tell everybody you got to take 5-minute showers, or you got to recycle better, or you got to stop, eat meat. Like, it's a journey. I tried the vegan thing for about 3 days, and I had vegan friends like, no, go here to, go to Trader Joe's, get this. It's really good. And
if you like chicken,
but I'm from Philly, like you gotta have a cheesesteak. You gotta have a cheesesteak at least every 14 days to sustain yourself.
Or even just something as simple as like putting cream in your coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a choice.
So, listen, and vegans, I applaud you. My biggest Achilles with the vegan was cheese.
Yeah, that's a hard one for
I'm
people
like,
to
you
let
talking
go
about give up cheese? Come on, man. Like, you know what I mean? And the substitute cheese is not. It doesn't hit. Like
it's not my thing.
No, it's not it. No,
it's not my thing at all. No.
Vegans, I applaud you for that. But it's a journey, right? And so I also tried the 5-minute showers, and unless you have like
my hair is curly, it's not.
No, but I mean, unless you have the instant warming situation, like you gotta run the shower for at least a minute before you jump in. It's too cold.
Yeah.
So I did try that unsuccessfully, but and I'm not, I drive a Tesla, but I'm not saying that everybody needs to get a Tesla or an EV, but if your journey starts with hybrid and then you eventually transition 100% to zero emissions, I get it. But there's
also ethical concerns with electric vehicles. Which one? It depends on what you want to weigh.
Exactly. It's what we talked about. It's like deciding what you sacrifice and what business you're going to stand on, right?
Exactly.
So, but the goal of this podcast is to educate and encourage, just like you have, encourage people to try to do one thing, and that it's not a one size fits all. You want to try the 5-minute showers, you want to try going vegan, you want to try just giving up beef, you want to
Make an
try
effort.
walking, right? You want to try walking instead of driving to the mailbox. The mailbox is 200 feet. If you're driving there, like, stop that.
Get
Like,
some exercise.
exactly. So I appreciate that feedback. So this is a section of the podcast where I call it spill bars or fill jars. Now we talked about this. We talked about this segment, and essentially based on the song that the guest presents to me, I get an opportunity to kind of flip samples from that song and create new music, and the guest has an opportunity to decide whether they want to freestyle, rap, do poetry, spoken word, whatever it is, or music, sing, or they can write a check. And we use those proceeds to any of the nonprofit organizations that we partner with. I believe that you have chosen the latter option.
I have. I'm a visual artist, not an auditory one.
I
commend those with the rapping and singing powers. I do not possess it.
Say less. So what we will do is we'll transition to or transfer over to that section of the podcast. I'll do a little behind the scenes of how the music was created, and maybe get a couple bars from Legrand. Who knows? You might.
Stay tuned.
But thank you so much, Sky.
Yes.
Star, everyone. Star was our guest. She did a great job. As per usual, visit keepthatsamegreenenergy.org. Questions, comments, feedback. You love it, you don't like it, recommendation. We love to hear it all. Any of the feedback is appreciated. But most importantly, more than anything, keep that same green energy. Salute.
Keep that same green energy podcast. Spill bars or fill jars. We got a star in the building. Achasoniye, many piakia. Achasoniye, many piakia. Achasoniye, many piakia. Achasoniye, many piakia. Oh, whether it's in English or Hindi, I got a lot to say. Abkasahe, Wobahood Achihe. You look hot today when Cupid arrow shot away. She almost got away, but oh no, not today. In the calmest way, made Bolo Namaste. She stayed dolo kinky kabine, tampas nahe. DJ PR Carti hey, maybe cubby cubby. 1 minute you don't love me, the next me lovey dovey. No matter what, I always keep my swagger up. And I give it to you deep like a dagger's cut. I'm making hits every time they tell me batter up. That's why the media and press keep the chatter up. Just another small step on my ladder up. Far too many blessings for me to try to add them up. Played with my feelings once they started to bloom. Now I'm out. Reducing that PR card to whom? Oh. Achasoniye, many piakia. Achasoniye, many piakia. Achasoniye, many piakia. Oh.
Children that used it on Wednesday try to change their worlds. Children that used it on Wednesday try to change their worlds.
The energy, see, we use an awful lot. Energy, you think we'd be sick? I'm running.